Efficiency Unlocked is hosted by two tech-savvy physicians and dear friends of mine, Drs. Adam Karu and Dale Gold, who are experts in using technology to automate routine tasks and increase efficiency in everyday and business life. Let's see what they have for us today.
Stay tuned for this series of episodes where we'll be discussing the game-changing impact of AI in the realm of patient care and physician well-being.
Get ready to unlock efficiency with NerdMDs.
Efficiency Unlocked.
And we asked ourselves the question, what is going on here? Like, my grandfather loved his job. I remember his colleagues when I was a kid being in the house, they all seemed to really enjoy their careers and their lives. And I wondered, well, what's happened over the last few decades? Why has it seemed to shift so much from those days? And as we dug in deeper and deeper, what we found was that, like Francisco was saying, there's been an explosion of data availability. About 7 years ago, when we started this company, we realized, wow, this is something really interesting, where we have this operating system layer, the EMRs, that is doing its purpose, but not really designed for the clinical workflows ultimately. And that there's an opportunity to create a layer, a technology layer in between that raw data and the clinician that really empowers them with the data, that allows them to take advantage of all the data that they have access to.
You just heard Eli Ben Joseph, the co-founder and CEO of Regard. Additionally, you heard him reference Francisco Alvarez. He's the leader of clinical operations at Regard. I get the privilege today of interviewing both of them together. I'll keep this intro short because we're going to have both of them tell a little bit about themselves. But as you will hear, Regard's mission is to build products that empower clinicians by harnessing the data they have access to. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved. I'm super happy to have our guest today from a company called Regard, as you just heard in the intro. And I'm joined by both Eli and Francisco. Both of you, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, I'm fun. This is going to be fun, especially with having two guests and one host. Haven't done this yet, so it'll be a fun little experiment, but I'm sure we'll handle it fine. So, I mean, as you guys may have heard on some of the previous episodes, we've really, tried to take a deeper dive into a lot of different companies that are, tackling some sort of efficiency task in healthcare. And I appreciated you guys reaching out to me to introduce the product that you have right now, and I'd love to others to know more about it, and obviously to have a good conversation today. So to kick off with you guys, we always like to hear a little bit of the origin of the story behind the company or product, and a little bit about the people too. So do you guys mind sharing a bit about that kind of inspiration to start this and where it's led you and how you both kind of came about in this company?
Absolutely. I'll kick us off. So I'm Francisco, and I'm a physician by background. And to talk a little bit about kind of that background origin story, I actually didn't come into clinical informatics and data and technology from the technology side. I actually came in more from the policy side. And, back in medical school, I was doing a lot of global health things. For a while, I thought I was going to do, global health and a lot of, local health policy, health economics. And I remember I did an internship at the World Health Organization in Bolivia. And I remember going down there and, we had all these different meetings with the Ministry of Health. And we would talk about different policies. And what really, what was really obvious to me was, wow, we can talk all day with very intelligent people about what best policies to implement, but it meant nothing without the data to really understand what was going on the ground, right? Like in Bolivia, what does it mean to talk about, these statistics that we use all the time when like a door to balloon time, in an MI doesn't, they have for many different reasons, they have no way of even getting down to that kind of data. And so, I think, if you talk to anyone who's kind of in the development field, or in global health, they'll say like, well, that's a pretty banal observation that yes, getting data in development settings is a very difficult thing. But I think that was kind of the initial thing that really started to get me thinking about, hey, how can we better collect data, better utilize data, better think about data in healthcare to deliver better care, right? And so that was kind of that, first that first inspiration for me that I then carried forward when I did residency in internal medicine, and now I'm here in the United States, and I'm like, wow, we're living in a very data rich but information poor environment, right? The EMR is just filled with data, and yet I felt like so many things in the that we're doing in healthcare at the patient's bedside is just not informed at all by data. And so, that really just incentivized me even more to think about, hey, what can we be doing to do this better? And so that, I think that segues well to around the time that I met Eli. So I'll let him take over.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And I'm Eli, one of the founders and the CEO of Regard. Quick background on myself and how we started the company. I grew up in the Boston area. I grew up loving computers since I was a kid. Building PCs in high school, LAN parties, nerdy stuff. Being a nerd in the Boston area, MIT was a dream school. I was lucky enough to get in, and I actually pushed away tech. My grandfather was a physician, and that had always kind of been sitting in the back of my head of a potential career path. And as an 18-year-old about to go to college, my summer job was writing software as an intern for a local company, and staring at a screen 8 hours a day at that age, I was like, I don't know if I want to do that for the rest of my life. We all stare at screens now anyway, so that didn't work out, but that got me interested in the medical career path potentially. And I ended up studying bioengineering at MIT. I was pre-med. A year after college or so, I actually took the MCAT and was on my way towards medical school when I hit the brakes and I U-turned. And my co-founder, Nate, had actually a very similar story to me. We didn't know each other at the time, but very similar paths. And for me, I was volunteering at Mass General, and I was kind of just observing a lot of the physicians there. And a lot of them didn't seem very happy. And I was thinking, well, if I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and 8 to 10 years of my life, I better be guaranteed to be happy at the end of that tunnel. So that kind of scared me off a bit. And my co-founder Nate had a similar experience. And when the two of us connected a couple of years after college, we bonded over this shared pathway that we had. And we asked ourselves the question, what is going on here? Like, my grandfather loved his job. I remember his colleagues when I was a kid being in the house, they all seemed to really enjoy their careers and their lives. And I wondered, well, what's happened over the last few decades? Why has it seemed to shift so much from those days? And as we dug in deeper and deeper, what we found was that, like Francisco was saying, there's been an explosion of data availability. And I think everything has gone from paper to digital, which in the long run, I believe will be a very good thing. But right now we're in this kind of awkward phase where everyone quickly dumped everything into digital medical records. And now it's easier than ever to store data. It's much easier to store something digitally than on a piece of paper. So we've been dumping so much more information and data to the point where I believe there's a stat that the average patient in a hospital has almost 1 million data points available. It's impossible to get through all that. And physicians know that, and they see that gap, and that bothers them, that they can't get to everything that they could get to. And about 7 years ago when we started this company, we realized, wow, this is something really interesting, where we have this operating system layer, the EMRs, that is doing its purpose, but not really designed for clinical workflows ultimately. And that there's an opportunity to create a technology layer in between that raw data and the clinician that really empowers them with the data, that allows them to take advantage of all the data that they have access to. And really about a year in, Francisco found us, and we had those similar interests. And you're in your residency at the time, is that right?
I was finishing up residency, about to start my first full-time attending job.
And he joined us for like a month, and I guess was intrigued enough to kind of stick around, and ended up slowly coming over to being a full-time, now our head of clinical on the team. So that's a quick background on us and the origin story.
Yeah, no, I love it. Thank you both for sharing that. It's and it's always fascinating to hear kind of that, where you came from, the things you saw, and really how you could come about and ultimately come up with a solution to try to tackle that. Let's pivot to, talking a little bit more about the Regard product itself, and specifically around, I guess, capturing how this product utilizes artificial intelligence in kind of a creative way, to decrease that problem that you guys were just highlighting, the data rich, but kind of information poor environment, to try and help with that efficiency piece. So if you guys could talk about that, and then I guess if you have a story to share too about from a customer or something that can add in some context to how this has really helped, that would be great as well too.
Sure, I'll kick off and I'll let you share some stories. So the way that I like to describe what we do in essence is, as that layer between the data and the physician, we kind of realized that there's an opportunity to create a system that helps harness the data. The question was then, how do you do that? And what we did initially was talk to physicians, and the way that most physicians ingest data from another physician would be through the note, right? Like you have your note, you can read through that, you can kind of grok the data better. It's filtered by someone that you trust, hopefully, on the other side. And we realized that, well, if we can emulate some of that, a lot of medicine, the origin story of the product was I was shadowing a physician, a hospitalist, and I was kind of noticing that he was repeating a lot of the work that he was doing, especially in the note writing area. And as someone trained in software engineering, if you have to do something twice, you should automate it. So I asked him, can I write some code that does what you do? And he said, of course you can. And I said, well, what do you mean? Of course, it seems so complicated, nuanced. And he said, well, listen, 80-90% of medicine is data-driven and algorithmic. And that was kind of the light bulb of like, if we can help automate that 80% and help generate kind of the stub of a note, as if you had a smart fourth year med student or an intern that was kind of grokking the note for you. That's how you can think of our product, as kind of like an AI intern almost. It's not perfect, but it's going to scan everything instantly. It's going to then gather that data, and then our AI system will actually help diagnose if there's anything missing or augment, and then actually write the beginning of an assessment and plan for you, covering every years of data, thousands, millions of data points, but in a couple of seconds. And Francisco, I'll let you share your perspective as a physician.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not only from my own perspective, as a physician who uses the software, but also so many different stories that we hear all the time from our partner sites. I can share one that was particularly impactful for me. It's especially egregious, but it's a true story, believe it or not. Was at one of our partner sites, they had well, I guess let me preface this by saying, because we're able to bring up all this data and surface what's important to the clinician, it really helps find things that otherwise would be either needle in haystacks or would maybe fall through the cracks, right? Things that, your clinicians are busy, you're seeing 20 plus patients a day, and you just don't, you don't have a resident, you don't have a med student, you're going through all the data yourself, and, maybe a medication slips through the cracks or something. And Regard helps bring the important things to your attention. And so this, in this particular instance, this can lead to a lot of patient safety saves. A patient was hospitalized, and they got a stent, a coronary stent placed on that admission, and the original hospitalist was taking care for the patient did not use Regard. They were just using the regular, their standard EMR, and they would copy forward their note, continue DAPT every day. And then day 3 or 4 of after the stent was placed, they switched services, and the next hospitalist takes over, and they did use Regard, and so they loaded up Regard on the patient, and Regard noted that the patient's Plavix, like one of their blood thinners, had been discontinued, and the hospitalist was like, "How could that be? Like literally, they got a stent placed, 2 days ago, 3 days ago. Like without that blood thinner, they are at huge risk for having a repeat heart attack, right?" And they go and check the MAR, and sure enough, for some reason, the patient's DAPT, that set of medications that helps prevent a heart attack in a fresh stent, had fallen off. The patient had been off it for 2 days, and it was brought directly to his attention because he was able to load Regard and see that information. Not sure, had he dug in through the medical record and been super scrupulous, he would have found it as well. But the fact that Regard just makes it very easy to identify, hey, this is the really important information at the moment that you're thinking about the patient's care, I think is essential. One other brief story is, obviously that's egregious when we hear a lot of things in maybe not quite as life-threatening situations, but the way that it helps with chart review can also be, looking for a needle in the haystack. And, when you're doing an admission, you're taking over a new patient and they might have years of medical data. And, most of it you don't really need to know, but there might be something in there that you do need to know. And, everyone has their tricks for how to get through all that information, but it's always a trade-off of, hey, I could spend an extra 15 minutes looking through this patient chart, or I could be spending that time doing something else. Right. And one of our users has the story of a patient who was admitted with stroke, and they were passing on as like cryptogenic stroke, and she loaded up Regard, and it turns out that the patient had like a well-documented history of AFib. It was just like more than a year ago, and she was able to look through all the different notes, and they were on anticoagulation, had been stopped a while ago, and all this stuff that was there, and just because people are busy and don't have the time to go through everything, or rush through their day, are overloaded and overburdened. This helps kind of bring up that floor on patient care to really enhance the quality of care that we're delivering, informed by data.
Yeah, I love those two examples. I mean, I think, I recently had posted, I guess it was a little bit polarizing on LinkedIn, but I talked about how just the concept of evidence-based medicine is going to start to migrate to kind of what a lot of people are calling intelligence-based medicine, where it's, and I think this kind of fits into that, it's, that stuff's in there, that person, the lab test or the history of atrial fibrillation was in that chart, but, unless you really dove back, you wouldn't have found that, or if you like search specifically for that. So having tools available that can kind of collate and sift and then surface, that information in front of the clinician is so key. And I said that was a little bit controversial because I think some people took my post as saying that we were going to switch from, pure evidence to like pure intelligence. And obviously there's going to be a gradation of change over time between those. But that's, having tools like this will be key when we even get more data, more nuanced, kind of personalized genetics and genomic markers and all this stuff that no individual human is going to actually be able to even figure out what it means. So that type of information is going to need to be surfaced through intelligent kind of software solutions. No, great. I love those examples. What, do you guys see, amongst like the market of, there's lots of amazing, I think, health tech companies that are trying to solve, either similar or slightly different, problems right now. But where do you guys see Regard kind of differentiating from the pack? Or what do you guys see as kind of your, the secret sauce or the part that people really, really love? Can you share a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question because we've been thinking a lot about it. We kind of span a few of the standard categories that exist today. We do help with CDI, but we're not a CDI product. Really, that's not our core. We do actually help with rev cycle and surfacing potential diagnoses that may have been missed, but that's not really what our core is. We're not pure clinical decision support. So we've been asking ourselves that question a lot. And I think what's unique about us is that we do kind of touch on a lot of these different categories in our own way. And, there's a lot of tech companies out there are doing great things, helping other aspects of the efficient, like there's a whole stack that needs to be done of work, right? And some of these things are getting automated, like the scribes or the automatic coding companies. A lot of them are generating more information ultimately as an output. And I think what's unique about us is we're one of the few companies that will actually help you make sense of all that data. There's so much in there, and there's a lot of companies creating more, which is good if you can actually take advantage of it. And what our partners seem to really love about us is they see that this is a separate problem that they also need to solve, especially in the inpatient world where the data is so much richer, and that our technology can help. It's designed for the physician for the ground up, but by helping them see that data and by surfacing it to them in the form of a note, it actually saves them time. So it has that efficiency play, but it also has an impact on the administrative side. It helps with CDI. It helps capture more reimbursement for the hospitals that we partner with without adding more burden to the physician. And people are seeing that as a unique win-win with a very strong, measurable financial ROI, but then also something that is very impactful for the physician and for patient care. So I think that's what kind of makes us unique in the space.
No, I love that. I was actually, reviewing your website, this weekend, with this coming up, and I loved how you even had that little calculator on there. Like just you could say how many of these. It was a little slider and you could put in some numbers and it would kind of it was like a little ROI calculator, which I think is really, that's key right now. In healthcare right now is, margins are slim and, there's a constant need for, any project or solution to not just generate, kind of a soft ROI. There needs to honestly be a hard ROI, so these things can almost be self-funded, in a way, if they're truly saving money, in a way for the organization. So, no, that's great. Can either of you give, maybe even a glimpse of like where you want to keep kind of moving this product? Is there any kind of like future path or roadmap that you're kind of hoping to get into as, as more technology matures, or you see, or hear new use cases from the clinicians using this?
Totally. Maybe Francis, you can share the clinical side and then I'll share the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many paths open given where we are sitting, right? We're at that nexus of all the data in the medical record, when the clinician is writing their note, formulating the plan, right? So off the bat, I think that there's a lot of things that we want to do to continue augmenting what we're already doing in the inpatient space. We one of the things that I'd like us to move towards is moving towards more enhanced clinical decision support, right? Like right now, we're already telling, we're already highlighting, for example, the example given before of like, hey, your patient is here for MI and got a stent placed and the medication they should be on fell off. That's something to bring to your attention. But imagine taking the next step of being like, okay, your patient who's being admitted with heart failure, per the latest heart failure guidelines, maybe these are medications that would be indicated for them. Of course, that, there's a lot of gray area. The devil's in the details, right? And I think that that's part of the difficulty, that we want to make sure that anything that we roll out is done in making sure that A, it's accurate, and B, it's safe. Mm-hmm. But that, having that integrated, not just going through all the data, but also helping you determine, hey, what is the next best step? How can I optimize my patient care to the maximum level? That's one area I would like us to move into. The other area, of course, is spreading out. We're already in testing with a few of our partner sites in the outpatient general medicine setting, but we want to get deeper into that space, but also start talking about subspecialty care, right? Having cardiologists, and then there's already a lot of interest at hospitals that are already using our software amongst surgical subspecialties, right? And so that's another area that we haven't had a lot of opportunity to focus on so far, but that's another area that I think would be right, because you can imagine us as kind of quote unquote generalists, right? Like IM, FM, emergency medicine. We tend to think very broadly about patients, but you can imagine how it would be really nice for the orthopedic surgeon to just kind of focus on that hip fracture and have regard just kind of take care of everything, telling, okay, you need to adjust the diabetes, and we'll tell you how to do it. Just have that kind of little medicine consult on the side running, helping take care of those finer points, right? So I think that there's a lot of opportunities on both of those fronts.
Yeah, briefly from my side, I mean, it obviously aligned with everything Francisco is saying. What's interesting, pretty much every one of our partners has requests for us to go to other departments now. Outpatient is the most common request, so we've started experimenting there, as Francisco mentioned. But we want emergency room is another one where we've been getting requests, the subspecialties. So that's kind of the 1 to 3 year horizon is that's the most obvious steps for us, is to start expanding to those parts of the hospital and to the clinics. From a tech side, what I'm very excited about is leveraging everything that's been coming out with LLMs and layering that on top of our system. So we actually do have a partnership with OpenAI, and we HIPAA compliant. So what's really cool is that we've actually already set up an integration with GPT-4, having it access the data, the chart, and we're allowing some tests, some pilot users. There's a little chat window on the side of the Regard product. And we have our little chat bot. His name is Max, and they can actually talk to Max and say, "Hey, can you trend out the last 8, hemoglobin values, or who is the PCP? What meds were they on before they came into the hospital? Can you write me a quick discharge summary? Can you write me a note for insurance?" And having it integrated with the data seamlessly has actually been really cool to see how they interact with it. It's still very early days. It's still, in my opinion, it's not the core of what we do is helping them make sense of the data. And to the point where they don't even have to ask the question. That's kind of the ultimate goal, is that it's just given to you the way you want it. But it is kind of cool to have this. It makes it more conversational. It makes it more of a story that you can tell. So we're really interested in seeing how we can take the core product that we've already developed and link it with LLMs to create more of the story around a case, so that it's an easier and more natural handoff to another physician or whoever else is providing care. So that's something that I'm really interested in, and we've been doing some experimentation on.
No, I love that. I love both of those concepts. And has there been any good kind of initial feedback with some of these experimental ones so far, even with knowing some of the limitations?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, everyone's like, this is really exciting. I think that because it's still in development, what to me has been really interesting, and we've always kind of known this, is how important trust is with any kind of AI system, right? I think something with us, our core product, all the algorithms are open box. So if you click on how we supported or diagnosed CHF, you can see every single piece of data and the diagnostic pathway to surface that. What I think is going to be the challenge with any kind of closed box system is the trust needs to be built somehow. What was really interesting, a funny story, is one of the pilot users for Max asked, who is the primary care physician on this patient? And for whatever reason, it responded with, the atomic doctor's name is X. And it's like, what is an atomic doctor? That immediately kind of killed the trust layer. They're like, I don't know if this thing's making up words, then can I really trust it to write a discharge summary? So the trust is so critical for any kind of AI system, but even specifically for the more closed box system. So that's kind of the next step. Is they're very excited about the potential, still some kinks to work out on how do we make this as trustworthy as possible.
Yeah. And speaking a little bit to that, you're talking earlier about the differentiator. I think right now there's a lot of experimentation that is putting kind of all the eggs in the basket of LLM, right? And, I think LLM is an interesting tool, but because it's a bit of a black box, because it's not deterministic, right? In terms of, all the inputs that you're giving it, it'll give you a different output, slightly different, at least each time. I think it's a powerful combination to wet it with, something like our model, which is deterministic, which is, it is enhanced with NLP and all these things, but it is ultimately able to say, if given the set amount of input, if it diagnoses pancreatitis once, it'll diagnose pancreatitis again the next time, given that same set of data, right? And so trying to leverage LLMs in a safe but helpful way, I think is going to be the real trick for healthcare in the next few years. And I think we're very excited. We're very well positioned to take advantage of that. But it's something that's on our minds as we're looking at a lot of the other technology that's out there, right?
Yeah, a couple of the things that I've heard, around LLMs in medicine, or what different companies are approaching is, they're either having to create some sort of checker, like kind of AI, to like kind of check and kind of uncover, these potential obvious like kind of hallucinations, or maybe even more subtle ones. And then also I think, there's some companies where they're still trying to use, even a human in the loop, for some of these things. Because to your point, they're not fully explainable, and like unless you can kind of see that and see where that story came, or from where that information came from, that element of trust is tough, and it so you definitely gotta be careful. But it's great you guys are kind of experimenting with it and seeing how it can kind of augment the existing product.
Yeah.
So, if either one of you could take this, but like, if you were to bump shoulders at a conference or even on the street, and it was someone, from a health system, and they, and you introduced yourselves and they were like, oh, tell me what your product is. Could you give kind of a quick kind of elevator speech pitch, to get them to consider looking further into the details of Regard?
Yeah, I can take that. I say something to the essence of, look, you've spent, the last 5-10 years, you've invested millions of dollars into digitizing and creating a very robust data system with your EMR. But your physicians, your clinicians, nurses are not able to take advantage of everything that you have access to there. And you're seeing that result in burnout. You're seeing that result in CDI teams that are overwhelming physicians with queries. You're seeing that result in denials from insurance companies. We provide you a system that allows you to take advantage of all that data that you've turned into something digital, and gives you a tool built for physicians that will enhance patient care, that will reduce burnout, and that will improve your finances.
Those last three, that's pretty key if a product can do those three. No, awesome. A lot of times listeners of these shows on podcasts, want to reach out to either the company or the people that are on it. What's the best way to reach out to Regard, or either of you?
Yeah, people are welcome to shoot me an email, Francisco. For me, it's just eli@withregard.com, or you can send it to our general hello@withregard.com. And yours is just Francisco, right?
Yeah, likewise. I always love, fielding requests, especially from other clinicians, right? Really curious about things, get on the phone call and chat. So just Francisco, like the city, San Francisco, francisco@withregard.com.
Well, great, guys. Is there anything else that you want to, let the listeners know kind of about your product that we didn't get to, in talking about the origin, the impacts, the differentiator, or that final pitch?
I think maybe the last thing I'll say is, and I'm really happy to see how many other tech companies, startups there are addressing this, but at the end of the day, I think it's too easy to forget across healthcare that doctors and nurses are the heart of medicine and the heart of healthcare, and that if the clinicians all disappeared tomorrow, nothing else really matters. All the administration, all the hubbub around denials and insurance, it's just, at the end of the day, it's all just kind of secondary to what the core is, which is people who are providing care to people who need the care. And I think the companies that are going to succeed ultimately are the ones that focus on that core. Companies that help make the heart of medicine more efficient are going to be the ones that you see value across the whole chain. And it's not something that's just kind of a Band-Aid on some other issue that has kind of arisen because the system has been focused on arguably the wrong things over the last 5 to 10 years. And I'm glad to see that there's been a shift a little bit more to focusing on the heart of what healthcare really is and making that a better experience for everyone.
No, that's very well said. And I'm sure it resonates with any any clinician, physician, nurse, or anyone who's listening to this, and honestly, any patient. I mean, I think that's what patients would want too. I mean, they obviously they have to deal with the patient side of a lot of the things in healthcare, but ultimately they want the nurses and doctors and other clinicians that are taking care of them to be happy and to
exactly,
so they can provide that better care. Awesome. Well, let's wrap this up today with our, we always have this kind of nerd alert lightning round, and it's more to find out kind of new, information about the guests and just kind of some additional insights. And it's obviously fun. So these are simple questions. You guys can either take one or the other. And we could, you can pass too. It's like a game show. If one of them you're like, don't really have a great answer, you can pass. But I'll try and run through a few of these to get a sense to close us out. Sound good?
Yeah.
Cool. So first one, is there a book that either one of you have recently read that, particularly struck you and why?
I mean, I'll start. It's kind of I forget the exact title, but it's the one written by the OpenAI folks, the AI Revolution in Medicine, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that was really impactful. I read that a couple months ago now, but like the way they paint a picture of the future was really inspiring. And kind of the way they detail out the experimentation they saw, it was just very exciting. So that definitely had a lot of influence on me, and definitely has pushed me to want to experiment and see what this tech can do cautiously, but very excited about it. So that had an impact on me.
No, that's great. Now, this one's a very general question, but what's one thing that you couldn't live without? And you can think of it in the context of, this podcast is called Efficiency Unlocked. So is there something in your life where you would say, man, if I didn't have this, I'd be in a tough position?
I would say, one thing is my my note writing tool, which is funny because I actually just switched over the holidays. I had used Evernote for forever, and then now they have all these. Now it became like a price structure and everything, and so I switched over to Notion, and I'm still getting my Notion up and running. But I started out in residency with every lecture I would attend or anything, I would just write up some notes, and then I would kind of build on So if I had like my my note on pancreatitis, I would have my fun facts about it and keep on adding to it. And so now it's my repository of clinical and non-clinical. It's my brain outside of my brain in a way. And so having a well organized and efficient search through note tool. Even today, if I'm admitting a patient with DKA, I just type in DKA and I have my little handy dandy DKA algorithm I can just reference at any moment. I love it.
Yeah, for me, the cop-out answer is my phone, but I feel like everyone would say that. So a more unique answer maybe is I'm a huge fan of shortcuts on my tech. Like I've learned pretty much every keyboard shortcut that there can be. I almost don't need to use my mouse. And I have shortcuts set up on my phone too. And then it's funny because I'm just so used to that. And when I see someone else operating their computer, like kind of moving their mouse around, I'm like, oh, you could be so much faster. Yeah. I think that probably saves me like hours, if not days over the course of a year, just in how fast I can move around a computer.
Yeah. No, that's what we teach our clinicians, at an internal kind of seminar that we hold, throughout the year. And keyboard shortcuts is a foundational piece that's like woven throughout, because you can use your keyboard, and then, we teach them how to even like use the voice recognition tools to like then build kind of some multi-step kind of macros based off of keyboard shortcuts. And, people just go, oh man, I do this so many times. And so no, great example. This one's a little bit of a fun one. What's your favorite hobby outside of work?
For me, recently it's been running. I kind of gotten into that over the last year, and I did a half marathon right before the year ended.
Cool.
And it just, for me, it's also like meditative. So it's just really nice. Yeah.
Yeah. I also, I'm actively discovering new hobbies now. I also kind of have been running for a while, and that's definitely been a huge stress reliever for me throughout my medical training and afterwards. But now over the past couple of years, I've picked up skiing. I was actually just skiing this past weekend. We were chatting about and hoping to get back into tennis. My wife and I have gotten dancing classes, so just trying to keep active. A few different things,
Cool.
Change it up a bit.
No, love both of those. That's, I feel like with exercise, it's key to kind of switch things up over time too, or either add in new things or augment, because things can get a bit stale if you're not kind of going for a specific goal. So that's great thing. That's great advice. I guess I'll ask you two more. One is, if you weren't in your current profession, what do you think you'd be doing?
I can kick off. That's a good question, because I often ask myself. I think realistically, if I were to be 100% honest, probably I'd have gone to like law school or something like that and been super boring as a lawyer. But I think I think the true answer of if I really could do anything, kind of going back to my origin, and kind of development policy and things like that. Perhaps working abroad, and I'm not sure. I'd have to figure out exactly how I would develop that into a career, but probably some kind of international development work, or maybe even doing some I don't know. Yeah, set up some kind of coffee shop in Colombia or something. I don't know.
Yeah, so many cool things out there. Eli, do you have something, or do you want me to ask you the last question?
Probably physician, because I was very close.
Yeah.
That, or I've always loved aviation, so maybe a pilot. But you can be a pilot too. Like that could be a hobby.
Yeah, you can always learn to do that on the side.
You can also always open up a coffee shop.
That's true.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last question is like my favorite one is, if you could have dinner with a person, either living or dead, who would that be?
I would probably pick Winston Churchill. I've read a lot of his biographies. I think he's an incredibly interesting person. Stood up to the face of evil almost alone when other world leaders weren't willing to do it. That's probably who I'd pick.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who I'd love to have dinner with. I think one thing, obviously would be someone like Benjamin Franklin, who is like, how did he accomplish so many different things in his life and have and seem to live life with such zest, and be able to think, scientifically, and also think about, the important, happenings of his day, and be so prolific about it all. And yeah, I'm sure he'd have a lot of great stories to share as well,
Yeah, I think there's so many historical figures that would just be fascinating to have a dinner conversation with, especially, with them kind of seeing what today is like, because how things have changed so dramatically. But now, thank you guys. I appreciate both of you taking time out of your day to share a bit about you and your background, and what you guys are trying to accomplish and are accomplishing with regard. I think we have an interesting audience for this podcast, where it's a lot of obviously healthcare, but there's actually a lot of people that are more on like the patient side of things and are really interested in this technology. So I thank you guys for sharing across the board how this is helping, and particularly the comment that you had made, Eli, about the heart of those that are going to do well are the ones that are focusing on the people that are actually delivering healthcare. So again, thank you both for taking time out today to talk with me and the other listeners that are listening in to this. And I hope you guys both have a great day.
Thanks, Adam. It's been really great being on.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blast.
Awesome. Take care. Thank you for listening to Efficiency Unlocked, Nerd Tested, MD Approved, a Nerd MD's podcast, by Drs. Adam Carew and Dale Gold.